Om Shanti. Just a little while ago, Dadi Janki flew to the subtle region, the subtle dimension, and I'm sure she's going to continue to do God's work from that subtle plane. I've had that experience that Dadi is already working from that level, sending her pure vibrations and energy to many others, so that then they can open up their hearts, they can open up their minds, and be able to know God, come closer to God. I have known Dadi Janki since 1957. I was 7 years old when I first met her, and so she was a very warm, loving, compassionate, motherly figure. And then some months later, by the time I was 8, we went abroad to London. And then again, Dadi continued the spiritual sustenance through sending us letters there regularly. And when I'd come back to India, I would meet Dadi, and it was usually in the month of August, and so it was a very lovely time to experience Raksha Bandhan with her. She would tie us with the thread of love and protection, God's protection, the bondage of protection, and we would experience again the same warmth and love from her. I went to Mount Abu a couple of times with her also, and again, this was in the 60s, and in 1968, I happened to be in India for an extended period of time. I'd taken a gap year from university, and after a few months of holidaying and socializing, I decided I wanted to engage my mind with something more substantive. And the thought was, well, I know the Brahma Kumaris, they've been my friends, I've loved them, but I haven't really understood what they're teaching. So I went along to the center and I met with Dadi Janki. And she was alone in the center, and the center was an absolutely tiny little place which was near my grandmother's home. So I was able to go there. And Dadi asked a question, do you want to say something or should I say something? And I said, I want you to share, I've come to listen. And then when Dadi spoke, it was instant. It was like something was cutting through all the questions in my mind, and there was laser sharp awareness and light entering. Dadi's wisdom, Dadi's profound desire to help another individual was such that Dadi could feel the pulse and would know exactly what it is I needed to hear. And she spoke about decision-making. And she said how in today's world the intellect is influenced by so many other factors: education, society, people, friends, all of these things. And so we don't know how to see ourselves clearly and think about what it is we need to do. And so I said, well, how do you clear that? And she said, meditation. So that same evening I started to learn to meditate, and that lesson about the soul was the most fascinating thing I'd ever heard. Understanding what's going on in the mind, where our thoughts come from, how we can channel the energy of the mind, what's going on in terms of the play between my personality, my conscience, my memories, my thinking, my feeling. All of this was explained in the space of an hour, which was amazing. I had all my questions answered, and even more than the questions that I hadn't raised, I had all of that answered too. So it was an incredible experience of deep insights. Next day, I heard the lesson about God, and it was again incredible. And then Dadi joined us at the end for meditation. And I had a very, very powerful experience of God, the being of light, the source of love, light and energy. So although somebody else was actually taking me through the introductory course of meditation, the 7 lessons, Dadi had her watchful eye on me, and Dadi would sit with me for a little while and share in the meditation experience. And so by the time I'd reached about the 4th lesson, she invited me to come to morning class, and it was a beautiful experience to hear Dadi read the lesson that came from Abu every day. And at that time, of course, Brahma Baba was still alive, the founder, and so the lesson that would come would be a very fresh one. And she would read it with such love and enthusiasm that it was really a very profound experience of going very deep into the ocean of knowledge. She would sometimes speak a little bit before the Murli. The Murli is the lesson we were studying from Madhuban. And sometimes she would make a few comments after the lesson, applying it to personal life and teaching each one of us, and that was within a circle, a group. She was teaching each one on the basis of her personal experience. Dadi never told us to do anything that she had not tried herself. And so it was always, do what I do. It was never, do as I say, or do what I tell you to do. But she would demonstrate by example. And her profound understanding of the lessons that were coming was so rich, so powerful, that my heart and my mind began to open in a very, very dramatic way. And my thinking began to change. I began to see that my time needed to be spent in a very worthwhile way, not just sitting around in a coffee bar with my friends chatting about inconsequential things, but really to think deeply about life and the meaning of life. And it was Dadi who opened the door for that exploration for me. And so I was attending classes all the time, morning and evening, and then of course later on, really specifically the early morning lessons were the foundation for the day. Dadi had the gift of being able to share the deepest wisdom in such a real and simple way that it made sense, that was really authentic. You could see it in her life. And so I think if it hadn't been for her, I'm not sure that I would be where I am today. So Dadi was truly a mother, but also a teacher. And as a teacher with great wisdom, she was able to share new insights on a continual basis. The source of her information was the lesson that came from Mount Abu, the Murli, but the way that she would extrapolate and the way she would apply and the way she would join the dots within the Murli was an amazing experience that really opened my intellect, and I began to realize the value of spiritual teachings. A little while later, she asked me to go to Mahabaleshwar, and there was an exhibition going on there, and the woman who later became the head of the organization, Dadi Prakash Mani, was going to be there. And once I was there in Mahabaleshwar, I was there just for a few days, but again, just being exposed to spiritual love, but also more than that, seeing how others were being served. The purpose of being in Mahabaleshwar was that they'd taken a boarding school where about 40 of us were staying together. It was summer holidays, the month of April. And through that time, the schools were shut, so we were there in residence, and we would have our meals there, and then we would go to the center of town where the town hall was located, and they had pictures around where people could see what was being shared, the spiritual teachings, and people watching the pictures and hearing the explanations behind those. And it was fascinating for me to see how people would walk in and they would be looking just normal, or maybe even a little sad. But by the time they'd gone around the pictures and everything had been explained to them, they would be smiling and they would walk out very happy. And many of them would come back to take the meditation course. And so I saw how instantly spirituality would have an impact on people and help them shift their attitude and change. So that was very beautiful. And I came back and I decided that this would be my journey for life, that I wanted to continue on this path and be able to serve others by sharing spiritual teachings with them. And of course, Dadi encouraged and supported and made all the necessary arrangements for me to get the permission from the organization's founder, Brahma Baba. She facilitated that in a beautiful, smooth way. And when I actually came to the point where I was about to go away on service, she shared 3 things with me. She said to me, never say no if you're asked to do something. If you say no because you think you don't have the skills or the talent or the possibility, by saying no, you shut that door of opportunity and you'll never learn. But if you say yes, it will be an opportunity to learn and to move forward and grow. And if you say no because you think that the task is too lowly for you and you're much higher than that, well, that's your ego. Because if there's a task that needs to be done and you're being asked to do that, there must be a good reason for that. And it must be of some benevolence, of some benefit for you. And so if you say yes to that task, again, it'll be a rich experience for you to grow and learn and move forward. So never say no, always say Hanji. And then the second lesson was, if you see a group of people gossiping, never be part of that group, because gossip is dangerous. It's dangerous for you, it's dangerous for your colleagues, your friends, your family. It's even dangerous for the atmosphere, because the atmosphere gets charged with negativity. And so never indulge in gossip. And don't say, well, I was just listening, I wasn't participating. But if you're listening to gossip, that is also huge pollution for your mind. And that's going to be a big distraction for you. So never do that. And so that was the second lesson. The third lesson was, remember that your time is very precious and valuable. And so make a considered choice. Should I spend my time doing this, or can my time be used more usefully in another direction? If you value your time, your life can become valuable. And so these were the 3 teachings that Dadi gave me before I left her in October to go off to Mount Abu and again meet with the founder and then see where it is he would want me to go. And as I was leaving Abu, at that time, Brahma Baba, the founder, said to me, make sure that you continue to write to your parents so that they know that you're safe and well and happy and content. And I knew in my heart of hearts that that was very important. I would have to do that. But secondly, Brahma Baba said to me, also keep connection with Dadi Janki. Keep writing to her. And I was a bit surprised because I thought it would be enough just to write to Brahma Baba in Madhuban. But of course, he knew better than I did. And a few months later, in the month of January 1969, he passed away. And at that ceremony, I met Dadi Janki again after not having seen her for several months. and it was a very joyful meeting with her, even though the circumstances weren't so joyful, but it was a very beautiful meeting with her personally. And it was as if she, again, was there to guide me at a very critical time in the story of the organization, but also my own life. And later, when I came back to Abu once again, by then it was the month of May, she was the teacher of the teachers' training that was happening that I was joining. Dadi, as the trainer of teachers, is now famous. She must have trained thousands and thousands of teachers, not just in India, but she's trained teachers for the world. People who've taken teachings from her, but have seen how she has practically followed those teachings in her practical life. And so they've taken inspiration from her life. The teachings are the map, but her life has been the power with which we've been able to move along in the direction that the map is showing. It was incredible how she knew what it is people wanted, and she was able to give them not just what they wanted, but actually what they needed. And sometimes we don't know the difference. We think we know, but we don't always know. But Dadi would, again, feel the pulse, and she would know what was the need of the individual and be able to fulfill that need. So that period in which she was training people in Mount Abu from May 1969 all the way through till she came to London in 1974 was a very special time for her. And my own experience of Dadi through that time was again more remotely rather than physically, because then Dadi had the inspiration that I should return back to London and do something in terms of serving the British people there. And I felt uncomfortable about returning to London, uncertain about my own stability, going to a place where I knew there was no centre. In fact, there were no centres outside of India. But her vision was always very broad, very big. And she said she could see thousands of people in London who were thirsty for these teachings. And so with a heavy heart, but with an understanding that this was important, I'd returned to London in June 1969. She intervened once again, and in 1971, she was the one who connected with us in London. She'd been in contact all along, of course, but she sent us a very specific message. A delegation was going to go to New York for a yoga conference. Yoga in those days meant hatha yoga, physical exercises, and there was to be a hatha yoga conference in New York. And we had an invitation for that, and so a delegation was going to go for that. And Dadi suggested, would you like them to stop in London on their way to New York? Which was perfect for us. We thought that was brilliant. And so a delegation of 5 came to stay at my home, my parents' home, and they would be very occupied, very engaged, because in the span that I'd been in London since 1969, there'd been a lot of service of connecting with individuals and organizations and setting up events in different places. And so it was a very busy time for them and for me. But seeing the interest of people, there was a very beautiful decision that they came to, that it was time to establish a centre in London. And so through Dadi's awareness and Dadi's understanding of the situation, the first centre started in London in 1971, October. Dadi had been the inspiration behind it, and so this became the first centre outside Bharat. And soon after that, then another center started in Hong Kong. But the place where we started was absolutely tiny. From little seeds, big trees can grow. And from this tiny little center, service began to happen and a gathering formed. But even by the time Dadi had arrived in London, there was actually nobody there for the morning class. And today, when I think about it, we see how somebody may be interested in spirituality, but they dabble in it. You know, it's something there for me to take a bit of from time to time. I can dip my toe into the water and take it out again. But for somebody to make spirituality their lifestyle, to make it part of their daily routine, takes a lot of commitment. And at that point, there were not many people in London who had that sort of commitment. But we sat with Dadi for morning class, a group of us who had come from India at different times. But she also wanted to start the system of morning class, and so her determination made it happen. And by the time she left London long term, because she would leave and go off for travels here and there very often, but the time that she actually left London to come and settle in India again, which was 2005, she'd been in London for about 41 years by then. When she arrived, it was one individual coming for the morning class. When she left, it was 300 plus coming every single morning to study the lesson. Her role as guide and teacher has been incredible, allowing people to move forward on the journey of their life with spirituality and a connection with God. And her love for truth and her love for people was the instrument that had allowed this development to happen. And so many things happened in that space of 40 plus years. But my relationship with her was one of being my friend, my mother, my teacher, my mentor, my guide, in a very practical way. And so, yes, it was a challenge for Dadi to come abroad without any English, without any proper schooling, because she'd studied at home with a pundit rather than go to a normal school. But Dadi's brilliant intellect and her deep love for God that made her intellect shine like a diamond, it was these qualities that actually allowed that expansion of service that happened through the next years. Coming with nothing from India, just a tiny little suitcase, and our luggage was just filled with tolis, sweets, prasad, and mangoes. It was mango season in India in April '74, and so we brought prasad and we brought mangoes to share with the people who were already there. But it was actually treasures in her heart and her big, big smile and beaming light in her eyes that made so much happen in such a short space of time. It's been a very interesting period to see how Dadi's pure desire for total simplicity, economy, and absolutely no fuss has been such that during this period when there's been a lockdown in India and many, many other countries, although across the world thousands of people would have loved to come to India to pay their respects and to honor Dadi's life and celebrate her life, yet nobody was able to come. It was like she had planned it with God. She did not want thousands to come. She wanted to slip away quietly without any fuss at all. She used to say, "I don't want you to spend money on flowers for my funeral." And I'd hear this and I'd smile and I'd think, well, Dadi, who's going to not want to give you flowers? But that's exactly what happened. You couldn't go out to buy flowers, and there were just a few flowers from the garden, which was what she would have wanted, and no fuss, no thousands of people from India or abroad coming. And so she literally slipped away quietly. So again, an amazing example of how if there's something that you really want, God works with you to make it happen in that way. And yes, since I've come to India this time, since February the 5th, she's been in Ahmedabad and not very well. But at the age of 104, then the chariot has become a bit tired, the organs have become a little worn out, and so things weren't functioning so well. But the last week before she passed away, the sister who was with her all the time, Sister Hansa, had the inspiration to bring her to Abu, and the doctors were able to let her come comfortably, easily. And so we came to Abu literally a week before she passed away. So her desire to be in Abu, which is her sacred home, a pilgrimage place for us, but a home for her. So she came to Abu and she was there in the hospital. And in fact, the last evening she was actually quite well. The oxygen mask was gone, she was breathing normally. All the intravenous tubes and things were gone, things had settled and everything seemed quite stable. And then through the night, she decided it was time to go. And she knew it was lockdown, she knew that it was a quiet time. And the second thing about that was that on the night that she was flying off, there was a thunderstorm. Unseasonal. We don't get rain usually in the month of March, but there were heavy rains through the night, and there was even thunder and lightning. But in the morning, when it was time for the ceremonies to begin, the rain had stopped and the sun was shining. But it was like nature had even cleansed the earth for her departure, for her to fly away. So it was interesting to see how all that came together, and that pure desire to just be in conscious awareness of God and then to leave actually happened in that way. She was fully aware, fully conscious, remembering God, and the soul flew to God's lap.